Hello everyone. Welcome to the final section of the fourth chapter of Falling for Truth, Jacob's Ladder. Pyramid 3. Awareness, Osiris, Rubedo. What you conceive and imagine about the process of dying and what you fear as death is actually the process of discovering the only thing about you or connected with you that is alive. Bob Serrigal. Once one has a good view from the doorway, there are two options. The first is to do their best to integrate and solidify the awakening in order to deal with dream reality in a new way as a new thing. But sometimes, even in the midst of the most deeply felt gratitude, something is still whispering, maybe this is not it either. Maybe there is another reality or awareness out there. Even possessing an integrated clarity within the cave, some still have a need or even an anger to know who or what is dreaming. The lure of the long tunnel out is too much for them. While it may appear as though one walks out of the cave down a tunnel, or that Truman Burbank sailed the sea away from Sea Haven, the pathway really is in the other direction, within. The exit door demands we walk into the very depths of every self we've ever believed ourselves to be. This cannot happen anywhere but where we are. The most uncomfortable and difficult places are right where we are this moment. Hence, oddly, to take the first step out the exit door, the final alchemic stage of rubedo, is a trip into the deepest recesses of the self. There is no geographic region for truth. It is not in India, China, or with the Navajo. Truth exists within. Traveling all over looking for it can be helpful, but it can also become a substitute for being still. Beyond a look at the alchemic symbolism presented for this stage, there is not much that I can personally say about walking to the end of that exit tunnel. At least, I don't think I can. This stage can only really be talked about by someone who has finished it. That someone is not me. All I can do is provide a framework for examination of what this stage might look like. To reach the process observer, the open exit door, is to reach the totality of the mental realm, yet is still not complete. The witnessing of our outer world is a projected illusion, and oneself is that witness. This is near the top of the ladder, but it is still an incomplete experience. What is lacking is that one does not yet realize oneself to be the totality, but is still identified as an individual center of awareness, tied to a lamenting human mind. One is stuck in a tragic Twilight Zone dimension, dead to all meaning in a world that no longer exists, yet not having found life. One's remaining days are haunted until the final key for release can be found. John Kent. Rose also called the process observer the manifested mind, that which creates. At the base of the third pyramid is a complementary point at the opposite end, which Rose called the unmanifested mind. The unmanifested mind can be considered the place where the objects created come from. The place of all possibility, past, present, and future reside there. To fully know the totality of the self, one will have to go beyond even the mind to what is. Going beyond all of this is an experience of being out of one's mind. Or, as Mr. Park used to tell us, you must go crazy to know God. It's not about finding God, but realizing that God and the seeker, me, are only mental concepts. Something lays beyond all that. And it is not myself, for it is not personal. The process observer, or witness consciousness in Advaita, is a keyhole to see this deeper reality. But we still must become formless to pass through the eye of the needle concept. The third process is known in alchemy as the very mysterious stage of rubedo, reddening, and was very, very rarely mentioned in the texts. It was likely thought that so few people would make it to this stage that presenting it would just be confusing. What is presented describes rubedo as akin to a leap in consciousness, where everything comes together, symbolically above and below marry. Rubedo is very hot like a kiln, the stone, the essence, being perfected through heat and pressure. It is a redemption through sacrifice, and what is sacrificed is the dearly held egocentric idea of life. The alchemist who manifested the White Queen in albedo gives birth to himself as the Red Queen. It is the Red King rising up in the final plate 15 of the Mutus Liber. While Jacob was asleep in the first plate, here he is on the ground dead. The seeker ends. The death of the old self has occurred. The objects around suggest the dead figure might be Hercules, the Greek hero version of Horus, Heru. In the distance, the latter is laying sideways on the ground, while a new Jacob moves up from it. It is interesting to note that Rose said that to make a shift from the second pyramid to the third pyramid, one makes a 90-degree turn. The process observer turning around to stare with direct mind into the ultimate source of one's own I-ness. One goes through the plug of the TV screen to find out where the pictures on the screen originate. Consciousness is not a journey upward, but a journey inward. Not a pyramid, but a maze, a labyrinth. Every choice could bring you closer to the center or send you spiraling to the edges, to madness. Arnold in the Westworld TV series. We reach into the third pyramid less from desire, but more because something unknown pushes us through the door beyond the mind. Rose suggested this is not a linear pathway like things seem to be through the first two pyramids. Instead, it is a 90-degree turn, which means not a turn to go inwards, which was a symbol of the second stage, but a turn away from everything we have ever known. In a sense, this would be the point where we realize that the latter metaphor is incorrect. We are actually not climbing, not going higher. There are no people above or people below. There are only people in ignorance of the self. Can one robot really be classified as further ahead spiritually than another robot? As such, the turn creates an evenness or equalness to the search. No longer are we trying to rise to be better than another or a group, but to see what we all are. This symbolizes a philosophical mode to living, turning from life to seek the answers about who is living and why. The walk out of the exit doorway is, at some point, a walk into death. It seems that the only way one reaches the total self is to die to all that is false. By turning towards and not away from the great fear, we leave ourselves open to be brushed over by the great accident. The path Rose describes is not one that encourages peacefulness and joy, and thus may repel many prospective seekers who insist upon a path that promises serenity or delight as its primary characteristic and sole criteria for determining the truth. Rose instead promises years of effort and aloneness, of hardship of confronting the many facets of one's own ignorance, the restless weariness in the uncertain race between becoming and death. Rose regards the Albigen system as one of artful sobriety rather than presumptuous celebration. John Kent. To move beyond the process observer, this baseline EF is where Zen meets Advaita. Specific practices end here, as advancement comes from something spontaneous. While enlightenment is an accident, one must work to become accident-prone. All we can do is vaccinate ourselves for this new dimension, because to go through the exit door is going to take all that we have. Why is my friend behaving so unnaturally, spending all of his time alone meditating? His purpose is to find the meaning of life, and how birth, suffering, old age, and death itself can be transcended. And his method is that of vaccination and homeopathy. Cure like by life. Give yourself a mild attack of the disease now, and thereby build up antibodies that ward off the real disease when it strikes. Douglas Harding. The idea that we need to be vaccinated to handle the third pyramid is one of the best phrases I have come across. And since the third pyramid is walked through via death and going within, the way to vaccinate is to work with our death. We must begin this vaccination procedure as early as possible. Douglas Harding, in his The Little Book of Life and Death, suggested that one's meditation practice is to sit motionless and thoughtless, not to be quiet or happy, but to have a taste of death. Not death in the sense of heaven, afterlife wonders, or reincarnation, but total non-existence. Since death is the mind's great fear, we purposely walk into this fear. What is it like to taste death? The death experience may come suddenly without sufficient preparation, be it by accident, drugs, unwise Kundalini rising practice, or unexpected trauma. This can leave a person a wrecked wreck, a wasted wreck for the rest of their lives, or in an insane asylum, or wandering the streets, if nothing was done to prepare the mind for the encounter. Thus we have to work hard now to prepare for the unexpected, so that, you might say, we will be able to handle it. We want to be death vaccinated. All the while, I thought I was learning how to live. Actually, I was learning how to die. Plato. We don't like to think that death may come in the simplest moment, such as when I went for a hike in the Alberta mountains. Whenever death comes to us, it opens hidden potentials. Any survivor of a near-death experience gains a new interaction with life. The problem is that this new awareness slips away very quickly and becomes a memory, like the death experience itself. Yet they fondly remember the aliveness and energy of that time. The movie Fearless with Jeff Bridges demonstrates this very well. But because death was only touched, its impact fades. What is needed is to embrace death. What scares people most about death is that within its grasp, nothing we have ever done matters. We are going to die, and it will be as if we never lived. We keep trying to spin this in a different way. Those trying to get their name on a building or a yearly award are somehow attempting to keep their life continuing. Religion fosters this idea of continuation with a magnificent paradise waiting for us after dying, thus the ability to keep me alive for eternity. Since the egoic me does not want to come to an end, it projects an afterlife, its continuation. All the accounts of the afterlife could be nothing but mental projections created by an egoic self not ready to face its non-existence. When we realize that our normal day-to-day reality is a projection, it makes us wonder if we move into another projection once we die. Why not drop our beliefs, hopes, and fears instead and see if we get a real answer? That follows the famous samurai motto, whenever faced with the choice between life and death, always choose death. And paradoxically, when one chooses death, what they actually choose is life, or a complete immersion in the current moment. Western medicine does people a disservice by equating death with failure. Because it presents death as bad, it needs to be avoided and postponed as much as possible. But death is the only 100% guarantee, so why is something that is certain seen as a failure? People think that to examine death is somehow naughty or a sin. As long as they have their life insurance paid up and a burial plot, all is fine. Much of everyone's time is spent in some form of distraction, from crisis to television, to pretend that death is not getting closer and closer each second. What we should be doing is living right now. The biggest part of the third pyramid process is to stop being afraid of death and head towards it. This examination will be unique, yet at the same time common to all seekers. The process of second stage awakening uses the transformative power of death to bypass the normal mind, while the third pyramid process maximizes it to cover all aspects of the small self through philosophical examination and the opening of oneself to betweenness, so a still gap is present for the grace of the Absolute to enter. Castaneda hinted that at death a doorway opens, but we need all of our energy, all of our awareness, to not miss this tiny crack toward total knowledge and get sucked back into the dream world via whatever worries, fears, or hopes we might have. One of the reasons Rose suggested a celibacy path was that it was a key way to store energy, and we need a lot of energy to cross the threshold of death and then cross back into normal life again. If death gives us a doorway, some figured to see if such a doorway could be found while still alive. This is walking into death before the body gives out. Or as Bunyan suggested, die while you are alive and be absolutely dead. Then do whatever you want. It's all good. The idea is to go through the door of death without dying physically. Imagining or simply reading about this won't work. Egos don't crack unless they feel threatened. For this to happen, one must go beyond such ideas as white light, protective grandparents, and other projections of the first pyramid, and is something the mind could not previously possibly prepare for, which helps to validate the experience if it occurs. Death is nothing like we imagine it. Those who reach the top of the third pyramid talk about how much of an explosion there is at the end, which relates largely to how much of the seeker is left to die by the end of the path. The more one dies before one dies, or drops what one believes to be themselves, the less there is to die at the end. Once we drop something false, it does not help to pick up something else in its place, as an effort to fill the void. That is not emptying, but replacing. Through allowing real emptying to take place, it is no wonder some find less stable ground as they move along the path. There was no great welcome after years of intense and focused searching. Instead, what Rose found was death, the absolute negation of all that he had known, of all that he was. He claims that a mood of despair and oblivion precedes the death experience, as all of one's efforts and hopes seem to lead to nothing. There is even the sense of being on the edge of insanity, of losing one's mind. God remains silent and aloof. This can be a rough period in the search, and will test the seeker's commitment to the truth to the fullest, as well as the resolve to resist grasping at straws of attractive make-believe. John Kent. This is the real dark night of the soul, rarely mentioned properly, for it is not some sort of grief or depression. Rose stated, "You are on the verge of enlightenment when you see yourself in your totality and futility. Something must die for truth to be found. The artificial entity me and its beliefs about reality that have been in charge for so long as we can remember. The only cone we ever have to work with is our own current life circumstance. Working our way through to see in a new, clear, and honest way is the work." No possessor of cosmic consciousness would wish to change anything but his own erroneous view of things. Richard Rose. We can be in a room full of people and still feel alone. The deepest truth is that everything is a dream or a movie. Nothing exists, not even you or me. Waking up is willingly drifting into that fear to see what will happen, doing it because we can no longer stand the alternative of not doing it. The road to all of this is a most solitary thing. Even if a few people walk together for a while, each one knows that they are alone, and they cannot expect anything from the others, nor depend on anybody else. The only thing one can do is share their path with those who accompany us, and know that accompaniment could end at any moment. It is normal to look for silence in the mountains, or the forest, or the desert. These periods are like a lover's retreat. To be with one's own inner silence. Silence becomes our lover. Religious and spiritual teachers direct their students to practice detachment, yet it seems no one really has any idea of what exactly it is. People believe that detachment is somehow linked to how many desires or objects they have. On a basic level, it's good to find out where we have made our life more complex, and to bring simplicity into those areas. It might be our work, or diet, or activities, or hobbies. But detachment has nothing to do with possessions, and it is not an intellectual thing. It is not about losing our desire for a BMW, or finding Mr. Right, or giving away all of our stuff, because it won't be long until your mind is thinking about how to get all that stuff back. Detachment is about the possessing mind that uses the energy of emotion to make us believe that we will be better and more complete with the objects or experience. Look to rid yourself of the thoughts and mental states, Objects will come and go as they please. When you start out, it's a wide path. There are all sorts of garbage you can get rid of. As you go on, the path gets narrower, and the things you have to let go of get very precious to you. Finally, there's no escape. You go through the funnel, and that's all there is to it. Richard Rose. Ego is about finding purpose, a reason it needs to be here. Most people's purpose in life has only been to find their purpose in life, which never gets found. If it were found that there were no special purpose for our existence, ego would have nothing to do. This is why the search for meaning never ends, for the end of searching would be the end of the very ego that is seeking. As always, Rose confronts our egoic search to prop up our false self. He claims we, as a form, do have a purpose, we just don't like to see it. To be born, live, have kids, and raise them before we die and get stuffed in the ground. That is our purpose, and the only thing this place wants from us. All of our supposed seeking of meaning is to hide this fact of our robotic, puppet-like existence. The purpose of mice might be cats. The purpose of worms, birds. Any spiritual thing you get comes by real hard work, ruthless interrogation. Richard Rose Lectures. Perhaps we are but insignificant extras in an epic cosmic production. Maybe our life is like that of lab rats, placed in an artificial experiment by another species to watch our actions and reactions to various events. The longest journey begins with a simple step, the Tao Te Ching. The famous first step of the Tao Te Ching is the moment something causes us to start walking away from Plato's cave towards the exit. There may have been many actions previously to break the chains and get us to stand up in our seats. But from the standpoint of awakening to one's true nature, it is this step that one crosses over from being a spiritual seeker, something for me, to a seeker of the seeker, who am I? The Tao reminds us that it is a simple step, not a single step, as sometimes translated. Carlos Castaneda described the step as jumping into an abyss, the tarot fool striding happily into the oblivion. It is the moment Arjuna stands up on the battlefield. Before he could stand, he first has to fall. A fall due to hopelessness and meaninglessness, from seeing the untruth of the world as previously perceived and believed. Seeing the possible utter hopelessness and meaninglessness of our existence is an important part of the path. Depressions are typical from touching the void, the vacuum, the emptiness. Grief is another common reaction, as is anger or rage. But that is only the ego's perception of emptiness. The problem is, we see absolute reality with an individual mind. That relative mind experiences meaninglessness in a glimpse of emptiness. What happens is that the ego begins a slow destruction. Most spiritual work is the very act of keeping someone from the first step. Certain types of depression are powerful moments, especially when the depression is linked to seeing the meaninglessness of existence. Thus again, the reminder not to destroy the mind, but to back away from it, in order to see more clearly and deeply. Meaninglessness is also just a stop one must make on the way to totality. I am a mirror that madness looks upon and sees hope surmounting foolishness. Richard Rose. The story of the Bhagavad Gita is not so much about why Arjuna fell, the meaninglessness, but why he got back up. Krishna shows Arjuna the truth of reality, then explains why he should rise and play his defined role in the stage production. In a sense, Krishna represents hope, the outside force that can come to our aid, even if we are not asking for it. You may call this help angels, guardians, power animals, helper spirits, or inner guidance. There seems to be something that helps us overcome obstacles that are in our path. When we get frozen, hope can be the very thing that gets us to take the next fearful step. The reason most never experience this hope properly is that people keep trying to package it in a particular way. David and Jennifer brought great hope for the people of Pleasantville, Sylvia to Truman, just not in the package that they imagined. The more we turn ourselves over to some aspect of nature, something inside of us helps our finger move to meet the finger of God coming towards us. God's finger is always there, but we must work as well to not leave our outstretched finger waiting aimlessly by our side. Here we are waiting for the cosmic accident. Where no practice can move us there, only by the lightning bolt of grace can we finally experience that which is beyond body and mind and always has been. Right here, always trying to penetrate us, just as we have been blocking it for our entire life. In a sense, spiritual practice is only a tool designed to weaken the defense against the absolute we have been throwing up our hands against the entire time. Hence the statement, enlightenment is an accident, but practice makes you accident-prone. This is not a call to love ourselves, or to make ourselves moral and perfect in order to receive this help. Instead, this is seeing that we already possess that which we need to bring that help to us. We must learn how to say thank you and accept its arrival, even if it's in a different package than we wish it to be in. Well, on the one hand, we are programmed robots. On the other, magical creatures of possibility. It is a paradox that to gain our full magical ability of betweenness, we must see our robotic state and realize there is little that we can change. We look for the small part of the robot that allows for alteration and learn to follow the original design. We are not looking for happiness or to manipulate and control, but for places where we can take a rest. We welcome these moments of calm, laughter, and relaxation. They heal our wounds, sharpen our sword of discrimination, and peacefully prepare for the new battle ahead. A battle where the more we realize that we are alone, the more help we receive. It might seem that by reaching the top of the third pyramid we have finished our work, but the written reports indicate what we have really finished is ourselves. Extinguished the belief that we are a separate, special person living a meaningful existence in a real universe. One has become different, yet keeps the appearance of the old thing. Caterpillars get a new form when they transform into a butterfly. But when a human reaches the top of Jacob's ladder, they change, even though their form remains as it always has. In what concerns you, most do not think you have In what concerns you most, do not think that you have companions. Know that you are alone in this world. Thoreau. The Absolute is a very lonely place. You are the only one there. Of course, everyone is the only one there. Richard Rose. The world for the awake is a rather solitary place, and learning to be comfortable in this state takes work, because our conditioning to be social is strong. Once one learns to enjoy themselves just as much with a group of friends as when totally alone, that is when they have reached the new plateau. Most people are social because they feel so alone. Loneliness is the ego's way of responding when it touches the empty core. With a deeper perception of what we are, this loneliness vanishes. There is still the appearance of other forms, and still interaction with things, yet one tends to enjoy their time alone more than previously. One can then interact with anyone, for they know they are only interacting with their self. The beginning of such an experience can leave one in confusion and shock for some time. Even this too is eventually integrated, and a new awareness arises that includes an equal combination of detachment and love. They do not necessarily become a nice person. Their love may shine even in their ability to be a jackass. I can only guess at all of this. If it happens to me in this life, fine. If it happens at death or after death, fine. Perhaps it will never happen. Such is the unknowing that one must take into this work. We know nothing for certain until we know. All we can do is our best to walk the path of Jacob's ladder as is right in front of us, and to turn our attention away from that which is laid out to tempt and trap us. To look for guidance along the way, and to be of help for those with whom we can help, be they human, plant, animal, or unseen being. Thank you for listening to the entire Chapter 4, Jacob's Ladder, which I'm sure you can see was a very challenging chapter, not just for you to listen to, it was very challenging for me to write. Again, thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with the conclusion of Falling for Truth.